And ever since stepping down as the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in 2022, the 85-year-old has raked in millions of dollars in retirement. But that hasn't stopped a newly created website from asking Fauci's supporters for even more money. The site, FauciLegalDefense.com, has been, quote, established to help pay the costs of the ongoing legal representation of Dr. Fauci, end quote. The site also tells potential donors that their contributions to the fund are not tax deductible as charitable donations.
Well, this fund is coming amid a recent report published by the watchdog group Open the Books, which reports that Fauci earned a staggering $3.5 million in 2023 alone, his first full year of retirement. Well, the same report reveals that Fauci's total earnings in retirement, which will hit the 4-year mark in December, are pushing upwards of $13 million.
In a recent social media post, House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer writes this, quote, Dr. Fauci's actions cause the American people irreparable harm. It is unacceptable that former HHS Secretary Becerra withheld Dr. Fauci's phone and diary from the committee. We want answers and accountability from former Secretary Becerra. And it's our pleasure to welcome Chairman James Comer back to National Report. Always great to see you, Mr. Chairman. So tell us what you are investigating right now with Javier Becerra, former HHS, as well as the fact that Dr. Fauci is now asking, as we mentioned, for funds for his legal defense.
Well, when we first began the investigation of Dr. Fauci, we subpoenaed all documentation from Becerra. 100% of everything that they had on Dr. Fauci. Now we know they intentionally withheld the diary, which is probably the most damning evidence of anything, that Dr. Fauci was not truthful with the American people, and he led a cover-up. What we found in our investigation, obviously, is that Dr. Fauci told his subordinates not to put anything in email because he didn't want a paper trail, even though this was, by all accounts, going to be one of the most significant times in the history of our nation, where historians would want to know every single detail of what was going on, even as Dr. Fauci portrayed himself as the one American hero. But he intentionally covered up things. He did not want to leave a paper trail because he knew he wasn't being honest about the origination of the virus in the Wuhan lab, as well as the taxpayer funding of gain-of-function research.
Now, there are a number of attorney generals in various states that are also now investigating Dr. Fauci. Has your committee uncovered any kind of, paper trail in terms of finances that he did not declare? Because they're saying that they believe that he made money, off of this. Is there anything where you've seen, documents that show that he was receiving money that he did not acknowledge to anyone?
We have not seen that specifically. We know his net worth went up a lot because you have to fill that out on financial disclosure forms. But obviously, if he hasn't turned over all of his financial documentation, there wouldn't be a paper trail. Where we are with Dr. Fauci is, especially after the discovery of the diary, as well as his opportunity to clear the record with Rand Paul when he pled the fifth the entire time, we know that Dr. Fauci committed perjury to the committee because he wasn't truthful in a lot of things he said that day when he was being interviewed as a witness. Now the evidence has come out in the diary. So again, Dr. Fauci had an opportunity in front of Rand Paul's committee in the Senate a year and a half after he testified before the COVID subcommittee of the Oversight Committee investigating, and he had a whole day to set the record straight, and yet he chose to plead the fifth. That's usually an indication of guilt. Not always, but usually. And I think the American people are starting to see that a lot of people were duped by Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, I think they are starting to see it, and they want accountability as well. We'll see where that DOJ recommendation ends up. But Mr. Chairman, let's pivot now to the upcoming midterms, which will be here before we know it. An opinion piece from the New York Times read this: Mr. Trump's approval rating is below 40%, unnerving Republicans who worry that voters in the center will break for Democrats. Republican advertising spending surpassed that of Democrats in all of the top 6 races, except for one in Texas. Democrats, whose national party is entering the fall in debt, argue that spending will not be decisive. Do you agree with this in terms of the Republican spending right now? I mean, we did see how the DSA candidates, the breakout there, those candidates who spent more didn't necessarily win against those small dollar donations. So how do you see this breakout?
Well, candidates matter, and some candidates are better at managing their campaign budgets than others. I think traditionally Republicans do a better job of managing their money. One of the disadvantages that the Democrats have now is because of the investigations of my committee, the House Oversight Committee, and Jim Jordan's Judiciary Committee, as well as the House Administration Committee on Act Blue. And the donations somehow are mysteriously way down on Act Blue, even though it's a better environment probably than it's ever been for Democrats to be able to raise small dollar donations from angry Democrats that sit around and watch liberal news networks all day and send money. Act Blue, as you know, was the platform the Democrats used to raise all these massive amounts of cash with no transparency as where the money was coming from, with, as our investigation revealed, intentional instances of reducing the safeguards to prevent fraud on that platform. Now that all the leadership of Act Blue is left because of this investigation, they've all resigned and skipped town. The donations are mysteriously way down. So I think that's something the Democrats didn't account for, that the Act Blue people would head for the hills whenever congressional investigation came knocking on the door. And that's leveled the playing field. And I feel good about the midterms. I think that the American people are going to see the difference between socialism and capitalism, between common sense and stupidity. And hopefully we will prevail.
The socialism, the farthest wings of that definitely are helping the Republicans right now.
Yes.
But it's interesting because I was specifically looking to see what was going to happen with the large money Democrat donors who had given a ton of money to the Harris campaign and were so irate after it went through $1.5 billion in like 3 months and for nothing. I saw that one large Democrat donor in Michigan has said that he is instead having a fundraiser for Mike Rogers, the Republican. Do you think that there is a reshifting of people based on what they perceive the Democrat Party to be now and where they are?
Yeah, I think the old Democrats have said enough is enough. The socialists have taken over the Democrat Party. They've nominated crazy left-wing candidates that are, in many instances anti-Semitic, certainly anti-capitalism, anti-democracy in many instances. And I think that a lot of the donors, the successful donors that wanted to donate to Democrats that they felt like represented, working class families, they're disappointed in the extreme left candidates that are being nominated all across the United States. And I think that they're going to say, you know what, we're going to give some common sense Republicans a chance, and that's what's happening in Michigan.
Yeah, it's very interesting to watch this. It's a good campaign season. Chairman James Comer, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the Trump administration is facing another challenge in courts with a federal judge striking down a key immigration policy of the president's.
Foreign Affairs correspondent Alex Salvi has the details. Alex.
Yeah, Krisha, Edie, it's becoming a little bit of a pattern here. A State Department policy restricting visas from 75 countries now being put on hold as it faces a major setback from a district court judge. The court ruling that Secretary of State Marco Rubio exceeded his authority when he denied applicants attempting to enter the United States. Now, this policy was enacted back in January and was intended to limit visas from nations that were deemed to be a high risk of becoming dependent on public benefits. And now this list included countries from Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. And at the time of that implementation, Secretary Marco Rubio, very public about the policy's intent, saying that entry to the United States would be heavily scrutinized.
No one's entitled to a visa. There is no constitutional right to a visa. Okay, a visa is a permission to enter our country as a visitor. If you enter our country as a visitor, and as a visitor in our country, be it a student, a tourist, a journalist, whatever you want to be, and you undertake activities that are against the national interest and national security of the United States, we will take away your visa. People make policy decisions on the basis of pure theology.
And now a Biden-appointed judge in Manhattan putting that policy on hold, saying that an outright ban for individuals from these 75 countries is too broad for it to be considered legal. And even though Rubio instructed each case to be reviewed individually, Judge Jeanette Vargas argues that the ban applies to 40% of the world's population and therefore should instead be dealt with by Congress. Now, the administration says it will push forward with its agenda and will likely rework the wording of this policy before rolling it out once again, with the State Department last week celebrating 175,000 total visa revocations